All right. So Jacinta, yeah, Jacinta has been in Indonesia in 2016 ya Jacinta ya.
Mm-hmm.
You visited Indonesia and then you came to Bandung, West Java, to
Mm-hmm.
learn bahasa Indonesia, to
Correct.
learn what else, Jacinta?
So
Culture?
basically, to learn about the culture in Indonesia, it's
Mm,
very different to Australia in that there's maybe more structure involved in the way things are taught. I think in Australia, I think the relationship between the teacher and the students are more relaxed.
oh yeah.
So there's um, just more friend. It's not to say that students are unfriendly in Indonesia, but rather than seeing, I think there's just more less boundaries between teachers and students in Australia, just a bit more relaxed.
All right. So when you come back to Indonesia, Jacinta, maybe do you have any planning to come?
Um, yeah, I think I'm getting my vaccination next week. So, and then by the end of next month, I'll be vaccinated. But I don't know when I will go back to Indonesia. I think I'd love to. It's on the cards.
Mhm.
Um, it's a beautiful country. People are very kind, uh, and I've really enjoyed working there. Going to the schools there, the students are very enthusiastic about learning, and um, I've always had a great experience there. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I still remember Jacinta when you go around Bandung, yeah, accompanied by me. You still remember around to volcano? Because I
Good
think,
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I think in Australia doesn't have volcano, yeah.
Actually, I'm living near a volcano.
Oh,
Yeah, Mount Gambier is actually it's an old volcano, hasn't erupted for over 500 years.
oh, I see.
Yeah, we do have volcanoes, but they aren't
Hmm.
active, so they're inactive. So
Oh,
they're extinct.
oh, different with in Indonesia, ya. In Indonesia active and in Australia inactive, ya.
Yes.
Oh, I see. Jadi
It's
berbeda ya
old.
teman-teman. Kalau di Australia itu katanya tidak aktif, kalau di Indonesia itu aktif volcanonya. So,
Mm.
Jacinta, today you are a teacher, a senior high school or junior high school or primary?
I asked to teach middle school, so I teach students who are aged 12, 13, 14, and 15.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I think in Indonesia probably senior high school ya, or we call it SMA, sekolah menengah atas. Jacinta.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, can you tell us so far about the education system in Australia, Jacinta? Primary school, how long? 6 year, 6th grade, or?
Mhm.
Mm,
So they spend 6 years in primary school. They start school when they're about age 5,
mm.
6, and then they stay in the same class until year 6.
Oh, I
Year
see.
7 is when they start doing subject specialization like science
All right.
and have a science teacher. They'll have a maths teacher, an English teacher, and a
Mm,
different humanities teacher about learning about history and geography,
okay.
um, and also a different sports teacher. But they don't get to choose what subjects they do. They generally have they generally have compulsory subjects like science and English and maths, etc.
Oh,
It's
that.
only when they're 17 and
I
they can choose subjects like psychology.
All right. So you mentioned that in Australia there is a compulsory subject and there is some subjects such as um, humanities, humanity subject. So
Yes.
how about civic education, Jacinta? Because in Indonesia there is civic education subject, and I teach civic
Mm,
education.
I see. Yes, I have heard this. And civic education is. Tell me a little bit more about what you teach in civics education in Indonesia, because
Mm,
maybe there's a crossover. So tell me what you teach in civics.
mm. Yeah, I teach about how relationship between individual and government, how to make the individual to be a good citizen, and also how to know how to teach students to have the political literacy and social and moral responsibility. How about in Australia? How in Australia? The subject similar with I teach.
Yeah. So I think what you'll find is that civics isn't often taught explicitly. So we don't have a civics subject.
Oh, you
We
don't
do
have.
have, no, but we do have subjects like legal studies where you can learn about the law and how um, the government is structured. So you can learn about that. And that's a year 11 subject. So that's when the student is 17 or 18. We do have history and humanities where you learn a little bit more about the environment. For example, our responsibility to looking after the environment. We also might be looking at a bit about like urbanization, about how cities are becoming more populated and country towns are becoming smaller and smaller. So you learn about trends in the environment, trends in society, but not necessarily looking at yourself as a into the politics as such. You wouldn't really name the politicians, but you would understand the responsibility of just being in the social world. So you learn about the environment, you'd learn about economy, and how countries like Australia get money in their cities through agriculture and businesses like technology, digital technologies, and inventions through science. But I don't think we have an equivalent in Australia, just like you do in civics in Indonesia, which you are teaching as a subject, which is quite interesting because you'd think civics being so important, it's really, especially we live in also in a democracy in Australia, how important it is to have that knowledge of how democracy is understood. So the fact that you have that in Indonesia tells me that the citizens the students are empowered with the knowledge of how to be better informed about the environment around them. So when they're watching the television, when they're reading something about the news on their phone or something, that they would have an informed understanding about how to make a decision in their voting when it comes to choosing a new government.
All right.
And that your students, your people as a nation would have a more informed decision about what parties they are involved in. Like some of them might become politicians one day, whereas I think in Australia because we don't have that. It's a little bit more hard work, like it's more independent. Like if a student's interested about politics, they have to join the Young Liberal Party or the Young Greens Party themselves, but they don't get information about that from the school. They would have to go out and do it for themselves. So it's not. So I think in Indonesia, you've got more of a how do you put it? The opportunity to learn that. And that's a great thing, I think. That's something that we miss out in Australia for sure.
Okay. All right. This is new information, about Australia, Jacinta, is quite interesting for us because I want to learn Australia's education system. We know that in Australia education system very good, in across, around the world. So I would like to how to learn from Australia to enhance or to improve the education quality, Jacinta, especially in the pandemic, the COVID-19
Right.
pandemic, because
Yeah.
I'm a teacher. It is so hard for me to teach my student about civic education, for particularly, but in my opinion, is not effective. And then how about in Australia, Jacinta, you are a teacher, and then how to teach
I am
them
a teacher.
in online way?
Right. Right. I think it's about talking about things that matter, which is number one. And I think that's something you can do very easily in civics because these are all topics that matter to students. I mean, I'm a science teacher by trade. So my selling points are definitely in how we can create technologies, science technologies that improve life, like longevity of life, so people live longer. Other imperatives could be climate change, and how do we know more about the science behind rising sea levels and carbon dioxide levels to protect our earth. So when it comes to civics, I think we've got to find subjects that matter to young Indonesian people, because this is the stuff that they listen to on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram. These are things that matter to them. Do they care about the orangutans? Do they care about jobs, employment rates for young people? Are there enough jobs for young Indonesian people? Is there an issue with food scarcity in Indonesia and in the poorer parts of Indonesia? Especially in civics, you'd look at the rich and the poor. Is there a way that we can support people who are financially, who are and in their health, who don't have that much money? Like, I think there are key issues that you can structure your teaching on, so that students can feel the need to learn. And I think it comes down to planning around that interest, that natural interest that young people, they're so interested in the world around them. So having just those ideas brought to the table, and that you can extend those natural interests that the kids have. I think that's the main thing, Obi, that these kids just knowing how like naturally interested they are in the world around them, and helping them to understand these problems, these issues that we have, and letting them be part of it. We call that, you might have heard it as problem-based learning. Problem-based learning.
All right.
Where you talk about a problem and get students to start coming up with their own solutions.
All right.
There's lots of ways to do it, but I'm just coming up with a few suggestions here.
But yeah, in Australia, I think Australia is developed country, yeah. Indonesia is developing country. So yeah, in Indonesia especially, we need to improve the method of learning, the model of learning, yeah, Jacinta. So maybe do you have any example that we can learn from Australia? Because I want to make our student to be good and smart citizen, Jacinta.
Yeah. So definitely modeling what it means to be informed is a thing. So give students like opportunities, give students opportunities to practice, what's the word? Practice being in the role of a civil servant. So make them think like how you would think if you were doing the job of a government. So it's kind of like role playing. Let me write that. Role playing.
Oh, role playing, yeah.
Role playing. So you give them like they're in charge of Indonesia, or they're in charge of Jakarta, and then they have to, with all these situations, come up with a solution to a problem that Indonesia is facing in the next 5 years. So give them the statistics, the issue, the population in need, money, and they come up with the designs for solutions. And then they can talk about the policies involved.
Okay. All right, so that's good. Yeah, knowledge, yeah, for us, yeah, Jacinta, that we can adapt in Indonesia in the future. And yeah, Jacinta, for me, do you think this is still ideal that in the class just PowerPoint presentation, give the student assignment, or maybe do you have any idea to make yeah, our education quality being better?
Wow. I think I think the I think we've got a really good opportunity with all the knowledge we have on the internet, don't we? And
Mm,
when we make a PowerPoint, we put all that information that we want to tell someone on a PowerPoint. But there's so many different ways we can show people what we've learned using technology like Zoom. For
mm,
example, you can give the technology of
mm,
the PowerPoint to a student to show the rest of the class
mm,
what they've learned as well. You can there's breakup spaces in Zoom. On maybe not, but you can have
Apa?
smaller classes
mm.
and sort of mentor students in
Right.
that way. You can have quizzes through Zoom.
Mm,
You can ask them questions like, what do you think would be the best way to handle unemployment in Indonesia? And
right.
everyone can contribute to the discussion slowly but surely. You can have
International discussion. Full name.
Sorry. Sorry, Jacinta.
exactly, yeah, you can have like a natural discussion
Oh, okay. Yeah,
about
very
how things are.
all right. So probably I will try in yeah, my learning method in Indonesia. Especially uh, our plan is being a teacher in the future, Jacinta. So hopefully they can follow
Indra.
your
Indra.
recommendation, yeah, Jacinta.
Institution nih
Hello,
dia University
hello.
bos
I think Aprian, can you mute?
dia University of Surakarta.
Sorry, Jacinta. Yeah. Hello, Jacinta.
um yeah, I'm still here. I'm curious, like,
Mm-mm.
so at the moment in Indonesia, you've got to help me. I'm not in Indonesia. I don't quite know the context.
Mm-mm.
You have not returned yet to university. You're teaching through Zoom. Is that what's happening?
All right.
So is there no school at the moment? Are the students learning through Zoom? Is that what's happening in Indonesia?
In can in Indonesia, we have to make sure that the student have a capacity, yeah, capacity like the 21st century competence, Jacinta, such
Yeah.
as yeah, the students should have the collaboration skills, communication skill, critical thinking skills, creativity thinking skill, and also compassion, yeah, Jacinta, because not enough just creativity, collaboration, communication, but in this era or in this digital era, we need to put the compassion, Jacinta. Do you agree about that? Because I think today in Indonesia, so many, not only Indonesia, but also in some countries around the world, so many case, so many issue regarding about the moral issue, yeah, especially in the young generation, especially
Mm.
in yeah, in students in from secondary school to university, many problem regarding about the moral, yeah. This is
Ah.
our challenge, Jacinta, how to make my student, not only my student, but also how to make young generation to have a good behavior, to have a good character, because it's very crucial. Because as a good citizen, not only just smart or just have intellectual, but also they should have character, good character. How about
Mm.
Australia, Jacinta?
Wow, that's quite a big context to place me in.
Mm,
Well, I think just like Indonesia, in Australia, especially in the schools that I've been working in, the
mm,
emphasis has been on the 21st century.
mm,
It has been on ensuring that kids have the capacity to engage meaningfully
mm,
in a workforce that is connect hyper connected with information at the fingertips, that they know how to code on computers, that they know how to communicate in teams, to collaborate, yes, to be able to be flexible, and work perhaps with teams that are international, using things like you and I are using today, like Zoom, to communicate in that way too. In terms of character, I think it's not necessarily called compassion, but it is called international understanding. It's called being able to be understanding of other cultures other than our own. So having empathy, being able to understand others and not just be, I guess, the opposite of that, selfish, but to also think about the environment and to think about the all kinds of people. So yes, it is involved in our curriculum. Yes, it is. I think in terms of the moral standards, I think you're right. Our generations are changing. We have, I think Bobby and I, you and I, we're from a similar generation where we're very respectful to our parents. And I'm finding that, you know, students of this generation are different. Like they've got a different way of communicating with each other. They'll talk on their phones a lot. Like when I say talk on their phones, I'm just talking about messaging, and they talk and communicate through pictures and through online posts, but they're not with lots of words, just shortened words and things like that. And just in terms of their morality, I think they've just come from a different generation. They've had so much internet access. They've had so much information thrown at them that often they haven't had time to just nurture. They haven't had time to nurture who they are themselves as young people in their communities. So it's possible for them to have involved themselves in many video games and many things that aren't quite real. So social media isn't quite real. Video games isn't quite real. And having that as like a background of their growing up isn't quite normal. So if we could try and find ways for them to have school or education as a way for them to teach that education, I think that would be really good. Maybe there needs to be more of a formal process of how these students can learn how to become better decision makers when it comes to things that are difficult to decide on. And I think when you're talking about character is a big thing. Who decides those values? I think Indonesia, 85% of Indonesia is Islam.
Yes, definitely.
Is Muslim. Yeah. So the morals of that would guide your what you think is compassionate and in the Muslim faith. But I think we can internationalize that and talk about how Allah loves everybody, and everyone has there's ways around that to unpack that. And I feel like we're talking about some really big issues here. So maybe you can tell me a little bit more what you mean by character. What do you want in your students? What do you want, Obi, in your students when it comes to developing students' character?
All right. Okay, Jacinta, one more question. This is interesting information for us, Jacinta. We know about Australia education system, about Australia character education. So the last question for you. In Indonesia, we have a Pancasila as our ideology, and then we teach our student or young generations through Pancasila values. Because in the Pancasila values teach us about tolerance, about mutual respect, about unity in diversity, about social justice. So how about in Australia? Because Australia, I think, multicultural, yeah? In my opinion, I don't know. So maybe you can tell us about Australia society. Is it multicultural society? And then how to teach them to have tolerance, to have mutual respect, to have multiculturalism. and then united in diversity. Yeah, Indonesia has a Pancasila. How about in Australia? Jacinta still has discrimination in Australia between Western and Eastern people?
Mm. Um, I don't think, I think there needs to be a bit of context given for Australia. So Australia is a young country.
Hmm.
We were probably only, I think we're probably only about 300 years old. Australia is about 300 years old. I think similar to Indonesia. Indonesia is quite young as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of as a country, what's that, 50, 60 years?
Oh no, 70.
70 years,
Yeah,
including
70 years.
including
Yeah.
the 20s. Yeah,
Yeah.
70 years old. So
Yeah.
we also come from yeah, so I think it all comes into the context of the history of Australia. So Australia was built, is actually 60,000 years old. The first Aboriginal Australians populated Australia 60,000 years ago. But about 300 years ago, British soldiers, British people came to Australia and dominated the land. So for many of hundreds of years, until about 60 years ago, there was great discrimination against people who were Aboriginal Australian.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, so just in terms of not being able to own land, massacres, which is lots of killing. So there's a lot of discrimination in terms of who was here first. Then it was in the 70s, 1970s, that non-white Australians were able to come to Australia. So that this was the white Australian policy that started in 1901. That was abolished. And so people from Asia could come to Australia. But before then, Australia was primarily white and Aboriginal Australian. So there's a bit of history that needs to be understood in terms of understanding the diversity of Australia. Right. So it's diverse because Australia needed skilled migrants to help support the job needs of the society. So skilled immigrants were let in, but also you've heard of refugees before, haven't you? Yeah. So there's also been doors open for refugees in Australia too. From the Middle East and also Asia.
All right.
And Europe too. So it's multicultural for those reasons. And I think that's the diversity that we face. Like lots of languages. English is the main language spoken in Australia. Okay. We are diverse in language, in cultural backgrounds, in religions and beliefs.
All right.
So some families, they're also spread around the world.
All right.
And so in terms of teaching diversity, sometimes we don't really need to teach diversity because it is where we just grew up in diversity. Okay. So I think when it comes to racism, I think that gets dealt with immediately at the workplace or at schools. That shouldn't happen at all. So that's more of a legal thing. So it's illegal to be racist. There's a government policy against that. So we don't necessarily teach for tolerance, but I think in terms of teaching history, it's about understanding that what was wrong in the historical ways of pretty much British invasion and how that affected
Okay.
Australia's beginning, and also it's contested. I think we don't really have the perfect answer to diversity and handling change.
All right.
For example, with the a recent Wuhan virus, there's a little bit of racism towards China, isn't there? Because of the blaming. So with some news reports, there's a little bit of distrust between China as well. So and
how about you, Jacinta? You are a little Chinese, yeah, mixed Chinese and Chinese,
yeah.
right?
So I'm Singaporean Malaysian.
Singaporean and Malaysian. And
Yeah.
how about the Western people? Yeah, to like to see you as a Chinese people. Is there any discrimination to you or
Not
regarding
no.
about the virus spreading?
No, there hasn't really been. I think it's just a minute amount of people that think that they have fear, but I haven't actually met anyone that does that towards me. Yeah, so I've been good. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think that very important, yeah, to consider that people who has like open-minded, and then who has like a perspective about tolerance, mutual respect, to see the world. Because I think please decrease or omit the like radical racism, and then discrimination, because today we have to be a good citizen, not only good citizen but also global citizen, and then we have to respect each other. Yeah, Jacinta, I think, yeah, thank you so much, Jacinta, for discussion today. Many information you share about Australia. Thank you to expand our horizon, yeah, about Australia, about Australia and Indonesia, because very important, yeah, for us to learn from developed countries like Australia. Thank you so much, Jacinta, for your time today. Hopefully you still healthy, yeah, you still healthy, yeah, and then and also for your family, please send best regard from me, yeah, Jacinta.
Same to you, and congratulations on your new baby.
Yes, today I'm in the hospital, Jacinta. You know, like this. I'm in this hospital.
Oh
This
my
is my
goodness.
baby. So thank you so much, yeah, Jacinta. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yeah. Hopefully we can meet again in Indonesia or Australia. Maybe someday I will go to Australia.
I hope so too. I hope that we can meet again. Very good.
So Jacinta, thank you very much, yeah, Jacinta. Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye bye. See you again.
See you again. Bye.
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 Bye. Untuk yang lain silakan di ini ya, apa namanya, isi presensi dan nanti ada sertifikat. Terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.